Welcome everyone to our Packers News pregame live chat here at US Bank Stadium alongside Pete Doherty. I am Olivia Reiner. It is finally time for some football. The Packers are just 90 minutes away from taking on the Minnesota Vikings for their Week 1 matchup. We'll preview some of the defensive matchups as well as get into the big questions surrounding the offensive line in just a moment. However, as always, I want to remind you, you can be a part of our conversation. If you're over on Facebook, leave us a question, leave us a thought. Pete and I will address some of those toward the end of our discussion today. We'll start by reading the inactives for the Packers today. So the Packers inactives include defensive lineman Montravius Adams, safety Raven Green, quarterback Jordan Love, cornerback Perry Nickerson, linebacker Randy Ramsey, wide receiver Equanimous St. Brown. Finally, guard/tackle Billy Turner. Right tackle Billy Turner is inactive for today's game. He has been dealing with a right knee injury for the past 2 weeks. This means that someone is going to start in his place. Will it be someone like backup tackle Rick Wagner? Will it be one of the two guards, Elton Jenkins or Lane Taylor? Pete, who is most likely to start for Turner?
I don't know. I'm curious to know what you think. It sure seems like they're seriously considering Jenkins. And he played all over in college. He played across the board. He even played a game at started a game at left tackle in college. He's the best athlete of the bunch, so maybe it'll be him. They signed Rick Wagner to do it, so maybe it will be him. We're not also sure how that elbow of his is feeling. Sorry, my mask is giving me a little trouble here.
That's okay. We're figuring out all of the technical difficulties, the wardrobe difficulties of this unique season. Pete, you raise a good point. What did the Packers sign Rick Wagner for if he's not a viable option at starting right tackle? However, as you mentioned, both Jenkins and even Taylor have experience at tackle. If either of the guards ends up starting, who would fill in at one of those guard spots?
It's got to be Lucas Patrick, right? And when he had to play last year, he played just fine. So the drop-off won't be huge, but they'd still obviously would rather have their preferred five out there. I'm just really curious, that's one of the things that teams always debate on whether to move the guard to tackle is then you're changing two guys because you're replacing the guard too, whereas if you just go with Wagner, you're only replacing one and Jenkins stays in his normal spot. But this will tell us who they think their best five from what they have to pick from is.
The Packers have to balance that need of putting out the best five while also keeping in mind, Pete, as you said, they don't want to make a position weaker. They don't want to make the guard position weaker just so they have a viable option at right tackle. We'll see exactly who they decide to put out as their starting five when the game begins. Although the offensive line is going to look a little bit different, so are the Vikings pass rushers. Defensive end Danielle Hunter has been placed on IR leading up to this game with a reported neck injury. However, the Packers are still going to have to go up a formidable pass rush, including defensive end Yannick Ngakoue, who had 8 sacks and 4 forced fumbles back in 2019. Pete, how formidable can this Vikings pass rush be even without Hunter?
Still good. Obviously not as good as with Hunter. I got to think he's one of the top probably 10 outside rushers in the league at this point. But it's still good, and especially could be an issue with the Packers situation at right tackle.
Could certainly still be an issue there for the Packers. They're going to have to keep in mind that Hunter, although he's not out, Ngakoue is strong, and so is the likely other starter, Ifeadi Odenigbo. Now, although the Packers are not going to have to face the pretty strong 2019 Vikings defensive backs core, including Xavier Rhodes, 3 of the cornerbacks are no longer with the team. However, the Packers are still going to have to face 2 very strong linebackers. Running backs coach Ben Sermons called both Anthony Barr and Eric Kendricks 2 of the strongest linebackers that the Packers are going to face all season. Kendricks against the Packers in 10 games has 2.5 sacks, 73 tackles. What are the Packers going to have to do in order to beat the strong middle of the field of the Minnesota Vikings defense?
Yeah, I've talked with an assistant coach in the division, and we were talking about the Vikings. This was a couple weeks ago, and he said he thinks Barr is overrated, because he's a pretty highly paid player, and I think he's made the Pro Bowl. and he thinks Kendricks is a better player and underrated, generally with just the way the public seems to think about those two guys. Barrow makes some plays, but he thinks he gives up a lot too, takes some chances. Kendricks is a really good player and a good draft pick for him. The one thing if I'm the Vikings going into this season, I'm just a little worried about is, age is starting to hit that defense. I think Harrison Smith's 31, Kendricks is 28. That's not old, but for an inside linebacker, they're kind of the defense's version of running backs. They get beat up and they age quicker than other positions. So you wonder, even at 28, is he still going to have the zip that he had a year or two ago?
Will they be able to contain the Packers' run? That is going to be one of the big questions heading into this week one matchup, first matchup of the season. It's going to be the first time that the Packers defense has hit the field since that miserable NFC Championship performance against the San Francisco 49ers, where the Packers defense gave up 285 rushing yards. Last time that the Packers played the Minnesota Vikings, running back Dalvin Cook was not active. However, in week 2 of 2019, Cook put up 150 rushing yards, Pete. How can the Packers put together a better run performance than they did back during that NFC Championship game?
Yeah, that shouldn't be hard to do because that's as bad as it gets, is that NFC Championship game. That's a really low bar. I think back to that Vikings game early last year. Cook it wasn't down in, down out where he got him. Although in the second half he had several 8 to 12 yard runs. It was more he had a couple long runs, and those matter. 1 or 2 of those can make a difference and win a game. So I think it's more with him eliminating the 30, 40, 50-yard run more than, the 5-yard run, because those chunk plays are what could you beat.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Going to be a big challenge for the Packers' run defense to put it together, especially given the fact that not a lot of personnel changes in the offseason there for the defense. Most of just across the board, not even just on that defensive line, about 10 of the 11 starters are returners, Christian Kirksey being the only different face. You could argue that cornerback Chandon Sullivan also was not a starter last year. However, it's not his first time playing in this Packers defense. They're looking within to see some change in that run defense out there, and we'll see if they're able to pull it off.
Yeah, I'm sure they're counting on Rashawn Gary to be a better player. Even though Pettin has downplayed what they've done, they had to have tweaked some things in their approach in the offseason. It would make zero sense not to after that disaster against the 49ers, and the run defense was an issue on and off all year. I'm not sure what your take on this is. Mine is they're guilty till proven innocent. So, we'll see how they perform over this first month and see if we get a feel for if they really have become better on run defense.
The Packers' run defense has a lot to prove in 2020. Alex over on Facebook says, outside of Kenny Clark, the D-line is mediocre at best, a bottom-of-the-barrel inside linebacker group. Minnesota should have 250-plus rushing yards today. Defensive coordinator Mike Pettin, even outside linebacker Preston Smith, has echoed the idea that the Packers need to play more sound to their gaps, that they weren't doing that in the NFC Championship game against the San Francisco 49ers. Is it that easy of a fix, Pete, that they just need to play more sound to their gaps?
Yes and no. Yes, that's probably a lot of truth to that. No, it's probably not the easiest thing to do. From coaches I've talked to in the league, a guy like Pete Carroll is probably as attention-detailed as anybody in the league as far as having his defense being gap conscious. As soon as you go in motion, you move anybody, everybody's gap assignment changes. You've got all these different formations and personnel groupings, so there's a lot of teaching there, a lot for players that they have to remember when something changes in the formation, and everyone on the field has to know their gap changes, whose does and whose doesn't. And from what I understand, Pettin is on more towards the other end of that spectrum, where he's more about being disruptive, playing the run on the way to the pass. Of course, it depends on the defensive call, but that's as a general philosophy. So you do wonder if that part of Pettin will change at least a little bit. It is a passing league. You understand completely why that's their biggest concern, because you have to stop the pass to win. But if you play run defense like the Packers did last season, especially against the 49ers, most especially in that championship game, you'll get beat by the run and not the pass.
There is no doubt in my mind that the Minnesota Vikings pounded the tape of the Packers' loss to the San Francisco 49ers in the NFC Championship game. They're going to try to pull from that as much as they possibly can to gash them once again in the run game. We'll see if the Packers are able to hold up. Let's take another question over here on Facebook. Josh wants to know, when will Aaron Jones' contract get done? A multi-million-dollar question there, Josh. Running back Dalvin Cook with the Minnesota Vikings, who was also a member of the 2017 draft class like Aaron Jones. He just signed his new contract 24 hours ago, a long-term extension. He joins a number of other running backs from the 2017 draft class like Cincinnati Bengals Joe Mixon. There's several of those on the list who also signed a long-term contract extensions in this offseason. Pete, how likely is it that the Packers are hopeful and trying to get Aaron Jones' contract done at some point before he hits the market in 2021?
You know, I can't say for sure. Jones says they have been talking. You know, he wasn't offered zero details or anything, you know, real meaningful about how serious they are, how recently those talks were. And so we don't know for sure Brian Gutekunst's view on signing running backs. I think we're all aware by this point of the perils of signing a running back to the contracts, David Johnson and Todd Gurley at the top of that list. I asked Gutekunst, I had a Q&A one-on-one with him this week, and I asked him about his philosophy, and though he talked both sides of the equation, he gave off the sense that he's open to it, that he basically said, if you have a really good player who's done it for you, you don't want to let him walk out the building. So it made me think that he's inclined to try to sign him. The question is, of course, will be the price. From the report I saw, Cook's deal was $28 million for an injury guarantee, which is not a full guarantee. That's only if he has a career-ending injury. Not an injury that reduces him and he's not the same player the next year, but it's got to end his career. So his full guarantee is going to be lower than. Austin Eckler had 1,500 yards rushing and receiving last year. He's in the same draft class as Jones. I think Eckler might have been undrafted, actually.
Undrafted.
And his deal included, I think it was $13.75 million guaranteed. Guaranteed money is the big thing with running backs. These deals can end up being, they can sign a guy to extension. It really could end up being a one-year deal, but 2 at the most, I think, is what teams are looking at, even though they say 5 or 6. So I'm thinking Jones probably would be coming in somewhere between 13.75 and whatever Cook's full guarantee is, which we won't know till the details of that deal come out. If it's injury guarantee at 28, I'm thinking the full guarantee might be more like 20, I don't know, or low 20s, so I could see Jones coming in between that. Cook has missed a lot of games, even more than Jones has. But these are big questions. These are huge questions for Gutekunst, huge decisions to make. I would think to get it done, they'd have to do it fairly early in the year to get the closer we get to the end of the season and Jones is still healthy, the more he's going to want to hit the free agent market because he has fewer games to risk getting hurt.
When I asked Aaron Jones yesterday when he spoke to the media, it wasn't yesterday, it was Friday, I asked him how important it was for him to get a deal done before today's game. He said, out of his hands, I know exactly what kind of process this is. I'm just going to wait until it's my time. He's been waiting. He's been patient. However, Packers have a number of 2021 free agents that they also need to deal with, including left tackle David Bakhtiari is someone who jumps off the board right away. Cornerback Kevin King, center Corey Linsley. You're right, Pete. The longer that the Packers wait, if he is healthy all 16 games, 17 weeks this season, he's going to jack up his price, and he's also, that's
he'll have the threat of free agency in the negotiations leading up to March. Santana Dotson was a defensive lineman for the Packers in the '90s, in the mid '90s when they went to the Super Bowl twice, won once. And I was talking to him. We were talking about different positions and contracts, and I talked to him about running backs. And I said, "Yeah, God, that is a tough position, because they get hurt and their careers end so fast." And he started singing, "Mamas, don't let your babies grow up to be running backs." A lot of truth there.
Well, the Packers, regardless, are expecting a big day out of Aaron Jones. We will see how he performs today. We'll see how he performs this season. and we'll see exactly what the Packers decide to do with his contract extension going forward. Our good friend of the show, Eric Baranchik, says offensive lineman Billy Turner is inactive. What is the starting 5 on offensive line? Eric, if you joined us late, we discussed this at the top of the show. However, there's certainly some of you that were not around, so we'll discuss this once again. Eric is correct. Starting right tackle Billy Turner is inactive. He has been dealing with a right knee injury for the last 2 weeks. We don't know exactly who's going to start. The Packers have a plethora of options, including backup right tackle Rick Wagner. However, Wagner has been dealing with an injury of his own, a left elbow injury. That could mean that one of the starting guards, Elton Jenkins or Lane Taylor, who both have tackle experience, could be sliding over at right tackle. Pete, if you had to name 5 right now, who is the Packers starting 5?
I was going to ask you to do that.
Well,
I was concocting that just as you were talking there.
Too bad I asked you first.
All
I'll
right.
go after.
Okay. Bakhtiari, left tackle, left guard. I'm going to go Lucas Patrick with the idea that Jenkins will be the right tackle. Maybe Wagner's elbow injury is the difference maker there. So then Lindsley at center, Lane Taylor right guard, Jenkins right tackle. But this is just a wild guess, and I have no idea what the Packers' plans are.
I swear I'm not trying to copy you. However, I do agree with you, Pete. For some reason, whether it's the injury or otherwise, the Packers have not shown a lot of confidence in Rick Wagner. After all, Billy Turner, who was the starting right guard in 2019, beat Wagner out for that right tackle
Another
spot
good point, yes.
this training camp. I'm not entirely confident in Rick Wagner. Doesn't seem like the Packers are. For that reason, because of Elton Jenkins' versatility, his strength starting as a rookie last season, starting at left guard after Lane Taylor went down early in the season, I believe that Jenkins is the Packers' right tackle starter. We don't know that yet. We'll see. We'll find out soon enough.
I got to say, that guy potentially, he's looking like he could turn out to be one of those great draft picks, a guy who's going to be wherever, especially if they leave him at guard, he's going to be an outstanding guard. If they end up playing him at center in the future, making him their center, he's going to be really good there. And to have a guy like that who can also play tackles, they're worth their weight in gold. I remember Mike Flanagan in the early 2000s. They drafted him as a center. I think he might have played tackle in college at UCLA, but they had injuries at both tackles. They ended up having to move Flanagan out to left tackle. Played about half the season there, held up just fine. A guy like that is they're worth their weight in gold. That kind of that flexibility, just the room to maneuver it gives a coaching staff is huge.
Elton Jenkins did not allow a single sack at the left guard position last season. We will see if his name gets called at the right tackle position, and if he does, how he fares if he's there. Let's move over to Mike. Mike says, watch tight end Bob Tonyan have 50 receiving yards today and 1 touchdown. The Packers tight ends room is led by Mercedes Lewis, Robert Tonyan, also rookie second-year player, last year's rookie Jay Sternberger, and rookie Josiah DeGuara. Each of those tight ends has their own role. Mercedes Lewis known primarily as a blocker. Tonyan and Sternberger are supposed to be more of those receiving threats. DeGuara is a jack of all trades, can line up anywhere, and can supposedly do anything. Pete, what do you expect to see out of Tonyan today?
That's a great question. I can't say that he jumped off the field in training camp making a ton of plays. I can't say any of the tight ends did. They all had their moments, but nothing consistent. It sure seems like to start camp, Tonyan's probably ahead of Sternberger. Sure seemed like it. I think all those guys are going to play a lot, as Aaron Rodgers said in one of his Zoom conferences during camp. He basically said they'll probably play a lot of 12, which is 1 running back, 2 tight ends, 2 receivers. So we'll probably see a lot of the 2 tight ends out there. And I think DeGuara is I don't know if in the opener how much he'll play, but I would have to think by halfway through the season he's going to be getting a fair amount of playing time too. A third of the snaps, maybe a little more than that. They drafted him in the 3rd round. They drafted him for a reason. They drafted him for what he can do in this specific scheme, and so I'm sure Matt LaFleur is going to want to get him out there.
DeGuara blocked in college, was a receiving threat in college. It's a matter of whether or not that can translate now into the regular season, not just in training camp. Robert Tonyan is coming off of core muscle surgery last season. He sustained that week 5 against the Dallas Cowboys. That marred his season. We didn't get to see a lot of him after that. He didn't get a lot of looks after that. This is a whole new season, a blank slate for Robert Tonyan. He has a lot to prove. This could be make or break for him.
Yeah, he's had a few years in the league now. He's making the transition from first college quarterback to receiver in college, and then from receiver to tight end in the NFL. There's ability there, as you saw on the play against the catch against Dallas along the sidelines when he got hurt. That was a good athletic play, and the Packers, especially with that not having a real talented receiving core relative to the rest of the league, they need their tight ends to produce.
Speaking of the receiving core, Joe would disagree with you, Pete. Joe says everyone complained about no wide receiver in the draft. They're just fine. Joe is confident in the Packers receivers this season. The Packers will be rolling out wide receiver 1, Davante Adams, Allen Lazard, Marquez Valdes-Scantling. No Equanimeous St. Brown in today's game. It looks like Malik Taylor will be taking over St. Brown's spot in the lineup. How strong can this wide receiving core be? After last season, it seemed like Davante Adams clearly separated himself. Allen Lazard was also able to make some plays for the Packers, but besides that, they struggled to make some plays.
Yeah, very curious to see Lazard and especially Valdes-Scantling against another team in a full game. After Valdes-Scantling had a nice camp. He's one of the guys who stood out more than others. Last year he had the camp that I was kind of thinking he would have had last year. Last year he did in camp, he made some plays downfield, but that was about it. This year it was less the plays downfield. I remember on the first day of practice he caught a deep ball. I'm not sure I can think of another deep ball he had besides that for practice. Maybe you remember something. But he did make several catches throughout the course of practice, over the middle and along the sidelines, a bunch of them on third downs, which was converting third downs, keeping drives alive. Those are big plays. And so he seems like he's a little more refined, a little more confident in knowing what he's doing. But we'll see if that translates to actual real game with real wins and losses on the line.
Look for Marquez Valdes-Scantling to get some more looks on third down, to run some more intermediate routes than he typically would in the last 2 seasons. All right, everyone, that is going to do it for us pre-game. Don't forget to come back after the game. Ryan Wood and I will be live right from this very spot once again to wrap up the Packers-Vikings Week 1 matchup and